Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. WeatherBrains episode 799, at close to 800. This is the pre-show. This is for Monday, the 10th of May, 2021. This is James. We're glad you are here, and we're going to get the logistics here, the embed code up. We'll get the guest on here, but this is that marvelous time of the program where we do three things. We share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and we say outrageous things. Slightly tardy this evening, but that's okay. We're going to make it. All right, so the embed code is up. Let's get the guests on here, and we will get this thing started. Not going to talk about this in the show tonight, but so guess what I've been doing here? I have to sign like almost 2,000 of these things, which is awesome. These are pre-orders that people ordered a couple of weeks ago, and I'm very thankful for everybody that did, and for everybody that pre-ordered, they get a signed copy. And I promise I am really signing them all. So that'll be, I'll be multitasking this evening, doing some signing while we're doing this. The publisher wants them all signed this week because they need to be shipped. And so I'll be working on that. But let's get everybody online here. So here we go. We're going to invite the usual gang. I think Daryl Hertzman's on the show tonight. That'll be fun. Okay, here we go. I do know that Jen is out tonight. I think everybody else just might be in. So let's see here. I think that's everybody. So let's hit the send button and we'll get our guests on here. Yeah, May 10th. Hopefully we're kind of making the transition from the tornado season, which has been pretty rough down here, to the tropical season. Have a little Eastern Pacific system out there, we note, as they're about to start their season here at mid-month. But what else is going on here? What outrageous things can I say? Pretty quiet. I'm hoping that we can get out of the cage here. You know, we have been not allowed to speak in public for over 1 year. And that's crazy because I'm typically in a school every single day. And we're doing them every day, but we're doing them by, Zoom here. And it's just not the same. So I think that they're going to let us go here pretty soon, maybe in June. So I'm looking forward to that.
I thought you said they were going to let you go in June. That's not
well.
good.
They might do that too. They might just do that. Bill, is your mic? What mic are you using?
I'm using that camera mic.
Okay, you're not using your fancy.
No, it involves unplugging and plugging things in.
Okay.
I didn't have any extra time tonight.
I need to find my song. Where is that thing? I went to this new soundboard and I can't find it.
No, not that.
Emergency broadcast system.
You play those tones on James Span 24/7 over the air and you'll get a fine.
A fine from the Friendly Candy Company. You know what the Friendly Candy Company is?
The FCC.
That's what the ham radio guys
Is that true? Is that really true?
Absolutely.
Yes.
That is like the one thing you can cuss on air and all this other stuff, and they seem to be willy-nilly about it. But you play those EAS tones and they will come down hard and fast.
Well, that's good to know.
So, yeah. Don't play those.
You learn something on this show every time. You tune it in. You sang that song, Tom Jones?
No, that's the Ides of March.
Oh.
Did you just rickroll
Here's a little
us?
song.
I did. I just totally rickrolled everybody.
Here's a little
here.
song I wrote about typical American.
I don't even see the social media song. Let's get social. Where is that?
I need the turn it off, turn it back on again, because I needed that today, and I'm beginning to forget it, James.
All because that was a great song. I've got them all in a file. Guess just got to drop them into the soundboard here. Well, here's a classic. JB, did you see this one today? Indian girls plow fields naked in attempt to bring rain.
No, I didn't see it.
Now, you've never done this, have you, during a drought?
Yes.
Oh, hearing his voice just warms my heart. I'll have you know that.
Yeah, I was going back and listening to some old shows, and it's hard to believe we don't have him anymore.
It's nice that you have those recordings, though, because not everyone has those.
Yeah, I got some funny JB stuff. Very funny. Daryl, what's on your mind, man?
Not much. About ready to fall asleep.
Yeah, I can tell Daryl is really excited to be doing WeatherBrains tonight. He's half asleep. But Daryl, don't feel bad. We're half asleep too.
We're keeping him from a fit of creativity. I'm sure that would probably turn out a new database or app or something we could all use.
Yeah. All right. Let me get this. Let me get the recorders going. We'll get this sucker started here. Okay. Here we go. We're still using the Midland AMS opening, Bill.
Yeah, Midland signed up for another run through the end of June, so that's
okay. So here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
WeatherBrains is brought to you by Midland Weather Radio. Every home, school, and business should have a NOAA Weather Radio, the official voice of the National Weather Service, and the AMS Weather Band.
Join the American Meteorological Society by becoming a member of the band. The AMS Weather Band is a global community of weather enthusiasts dedicated to learning and sharing their love of science. Visit amsweatherband.org to learn more and join the band today.
This is WeatherBrains episode number 799. Almost to 800. The weekly show all about weather. This is for the 10th of May, 2021. Oh, wow. Who'd have thunk we'd make it to 799? Troy,
Really?
did you ever think we'd make it to 799?
I sometimes wonder if I can make it to 7.
So, Troy, tell us about your situation there. How you doing, man? How's the repairs coming?
Well, the house is it's starting to look up. Had meetings with the contractors today, and they're trying to get everything done. But we're still thinking about July the 1st, and I'll get my old office back and be out of the Hilton. But it's just it is what it is. Everyone warned me, and I think y'all did too, James. Some of y'all, that there would be days that the contractors, no one would show up at the place, and that's what's frustrating for me. And you cannot get construction material, guys. You cannot do it in this country right now.
No wood, no insulation.
Yeah, the lumber prices are just insane right now.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, they told us that the hotel under construction right now, that if it were built today instead of the contract being let last year, it would be $700,000 more dollars.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Whoa. That's why, guys, that I'm talking to my contractor every few days and saying, okay, beyond the insurance, I want to make sure and so far my contractor's been great, and frankly, insurance company's been great. I mean, I'm getting a new house for $3,000. So,
Exactly.
I don't know where you can get that kind of deal. So,
and how was the evening reception there at the Homewood tonight, Troy?
No, here's the latest on it, and Bill probably knows about this, but I'm hearing from downstairs here that's over with. Hilton has decided there'll be no more evening receptions.
Oh, I better look up that standard.
And they're saying
no more alarm clocks either.
And they're blaming that on COVID, which is BS. That has everything to do with money. So I will tell you that.
So while we're doing hotel brains, so I got a complaint, Bill. We were in Charleston this weekend, and my favorite thing to do is to go get
Charleston?
Yeah, South
Carolina.
Or West?
Okay,
South Carolina.
All right.
So I go down in the free breakfast thing, and I love the waffle machine. You know, where you make the waffles.
Who doesn't?
COVID.
Nope.
And it's like gone.
Nope.
It doesn't exist anymore.
COVID.
I think
I've asked
you'll
about that.
I
I've
think
asked
you'll know
about
something
that.
Friday because there's a huge call Friday about all these things. I think we'll know.
Well, I'm hearing the waffle machine may be gone.
Well, I think we'll know Friday. They have
We're
not
gonna
pulled it
need-
out of the
Really-
Homewood. It's
We're
not
gonna
pulled
need
out of the
shirts.
Homewood standards yet. That there's no
Shirts and
reception.
banners, bring
That's
back the
interesting.
waffle maker.
Well, the way I
Exactly.
look at it, and what-
Change.org. Let's get it going.
Yeah.
well, here's the funny thing about it, guys, that I'm hearing from everyone down here, and they won't get it off Hotel Brains. And Bill, you may have some input on this, but they can't hire the people they want in this place.
No,
You can't
there,
hire
there is
people.
no question, and
Yeah.
no
And-
one would admit this until the last couple of days at the highest political levels. People are not going back to work.
No, they're
on
making
these
more
tenders.
money in unemployment. And they told me downstairs they cannot hire the people to clean this place nor to run the stuff in the morning. Because I said, why don't you put the waffle machine back there and let them fix the waffles for us? Well, we don't have the people to do
Right.
that. Yeah.
Right. Well, it's the governor in Alabama just signed a bill, and I think there are
Yeah, I
15
saw that.
governors before her that
Yep.
have already done that because it is really a critical problem because there
we
are
have
jobs
we have
out there.
we have restaurants here that can't open
Right.
during certain days because there's nobody to hire. So
Yep.
I mean,
And
I'm
a
all
lot
for
of it
this,
is-
for our social safety net. It's really important.
Yeah.
But this at this point, it's gone, beyond that.
Yeah.
I think that the issue, if you want to point it at the federal unemployment benefits, if you actually do the math on that $300 a month, that's not making or breaking anybody. I mean, that even $300 a week
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
not,
You're right. Yeah.
that's not the difference between somebody working. What has happened, and we're seeing this even in higher paying jobs, is that people the last 18 months have really forced people to step back
Yeah.
and go, what am I doing?
Yep.
Why am I doing it? Am I doing it for the right reasons? Am I getting out of it what I want? And a lot of people are just saying, and we had just in this market on the same day, we had one of the main anchors and the chief meteorologist from the ABC station both left. Now, one of them is moving with her husband because he got a job somewhere else. I don't know what she's doing in terms of TV future, but the chief he's like, I'm out. I still have time left with my wife and my daughter. I've done my 30 years. I'm in a position where I can comfortably retire, and I don't have to work anymore, and so
Yeah.
I'm not going to.
Yeah.
And I think we're seeing a lot of that, and that's a big part of it. And a lot of people are just like, I don't want to work for $7.25 an hour. Or in the case of restaurants, what $2.85, $2.13, whatever the federal minimum wage tipped, is, and you're supposed to make it up with the rest. And so, not to get all political brains, but I don't think it's just is the extra money. But again, that was sort of the point of all of that, was to help people get along, but also as an incentive almost to not work.
Well,
because we
Nate,
wanted people
one
to
thing
stay home.
You have to give, you have to give, and I haven't read all of it yet, but you have to give the president a little love for today, because he actually came out and said earlier today that people that turn down a job will be denied. That basically said, if you turn down a job for unemployment, you quit getting unemployment. He said something and I think that's a good move. But Nate, you're right, because I've been teaching for 33 years. I can retire. I have my retirement in the state of Texas through the teacher retirement, but I don't want to do that until I can get in the classroom again. And I think I've talked to Kim about this. It's real important. I want to go back to the classroom again. I'll be damned if I'm going to walk out, excuse the expression. I'm going to be damned if I'm leaving in the middle of damn Zoom.
Yeah.
I'm just not going to do it. I want to go back to the classroom again, and I want to be in a classroom, and then I can make my mind up and kind of go from there.
Well, I think what Nate's saying, it does ring true, but in Alabama, the maximum weekly benefit is $275, and the federal add-on is $300. That's $575. If you work 35 hours, at your normal $10, $11, $12 an hour, it does pay you to stay home. And we're talking to lots of loyal long-term employees that said, I'll be back when all this money runs out.
Yeah.
So there is some element of it there.
And to
even
an
here in
extent,
Texas, folks, there are a lot of restaurants that are closing in early. They don't open till late, that they just simply say they cannot wait on people. because they don't have the staff to do it. But it's just interesting. I think it's a good discussion topic, maybe not for hotel brains.
Yeah. Well, I am excited about one thing, though. You're seeing increasingly, jobs being advertised at $12, $13, $14, $15 an hour. We're going to get our national minimum wage increase just organically, I think. And that's not a bad thing.
Yeah. Yeah. But everything in Austin is good. Best day ever in Austin. James,
James is sitting back going, "God, shut up! God, shut up! God, shut up!"
All right. Hello.
Get the show back, James.
This is the ultimate rat hole we've just been down here for the last 10 minutes.
We'll just edit it out and post. It's okay. Nobody ever knows that.
Aubrey, you're not leaving, are you?
No, I'm not. I'm quietly listening.
I'm still waiting for my $10 to $12 an hour from WeatherBrains.
You just hold on.
We do it for the love of the show.
$0 an hour. It's get that 100%.
Yeah, we don't get to say that anymore.
I guess that's true.
That's the Alabama minimum wage. Be careful, Nate.
Zero.
Kim, we're glad you're here because, as always, you bring common sense and order to this field of lunacy here.
Did you see how I didn't say any of the words. I let you guys care. I signed on as usual, a couple minutes late because it was getting the kids down. I listened to what you were talking about and I said, okay, I'm ready to stay away from that. But
no, she will not have anything to do with the show going down the tubes. That's why we count on her to bring us back to where we should be. So Bill, let's bring in our guest before he runs.
Yeah, he hasn't said a word since.
He's the smartest man in the room right now.
Our guest WeatherBrains tonight is a program assistant at Iowa State University, a higher education consultant, and just probably the weather nerdiest, geekiest, most brilliant man in meteorology. Daryl Hirschman, welcome to the show tonight.
Hi, I need to update my LinkedIn.
Yeah, you do, because I figured that was wrong. So I give you a chance to, I should go from what you said. Well, you're more how you got into it and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
so
LinkedIn thinks I'm a higher ed consultant. I'm just a programmer drone for Iowa State University. So,
well, that's awesome. So I did pull that off LinkedIn. Sorry about that. But take us back, Daryl. How'd you start? What got you on this? And then you have to introduce us to that dollhouse behind you. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I like my daughter's dollhouse.
Yeah.
That's a room rater 10 out of 10 right there. That's
there you go.
Yeah, it's a real background.
And probably a show title too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dollhouses are points.
I grew up in the 80s on a dairy farm and would watch the weather, and they'd say 3 days of no rain. So we'd go out and cut hay. And then, of course, on the second day it would rain and ruin the hay crop. And I'd say, boy, those meteorologists are always wrong. I bet I can go to the university and fix this. And so I went to Iowa State, figured I'd get a degree in ag meteorology and be able to fix the 3-day weather forecast to cut better hay. And I realized things were a little bit more complicated than that. And so I started getting interested in computers, and I graduated in 2001, and they hired me the next day to start working on a fake Mesonet project, which still exists to today.
A fake Mesonet?
Yeah,
what does that mean?
So what we realized, so let's go back to 2000. Remember the dot-com boom? Money was flowing everywhere. The government was flush with money. We thought at the university level that we could get funding from the state government, like Oklahoma does, to build out our own Mesonet, a network of weather stations, primarily with an ag focus. The dot-com crash happened, 9/11 happened, and we realized that wasn't going to happen. And so what we found, though, is we looked out over the landscape, we found that all these different government agencies, other groups had their own weather stations. And so we decided we were going to take like a Meso-West approach and try to aggregate all these different networks together into more or less a Mesonet of networks, a network of networks, more or less. And so that's what I started doing. And we had a lot of neat partnerships over the years. And so the website you find today has a lot of data sets. Now it does have a data set that Iowa State produces but it's a very modest and small network, but it's one of the many networks that exists on the website. When I started doing more applied research, which basically funds my work at Iowa State, what we decided was, and what I found was basically that people care about data not just within Iowa. And we have research work that goes across the Corn Belt and goes across the CONUS, and then, why not? Why just ingest anything we can find globally? And so that's where it exists now. So the website has a crazy name of Iowa Environmental Mesonet, but the Iowa is sort of a misnomer at this point. It's sort of a tongue-in-cheek joke at this point.
And so you've basically gone out and vacuumed up all of the weather data for the entire world, it seems, along the way.
More or less, that's made available. And so a lot of it, some of it's proprietary, of course, we don't touch any of that, but we've built some neat partnerships with television stations over the years, even for making their data public. And so that's been exciting work that we've done in the past. Yeah.
So tell us about some of those partnerships, how they came into being, Daryl, and how they work. And are those open deals that other stations could approach you about all over the country, or just regionally, or what?
Yeah, I mean, over the years, we first partnered with KCCI and John McLaughlin, which many of you guys know, and we did something unique at the time, which was having a proprietary private television station basically open up their weather data. And it was interesting at the time was because, the sort of the news director pushback was, well, won't our competitors be able to see our data live, since you're basically putting it out in the public through the Iowa State's, services. And, John's, I think one of his responses at the time was, well, it's up to them to be good meteorologists, right? They could probably see our data anyway if they looked at our website or whatever, but if they can't, interpret what the data shows them or basically produce a better forecast, then there's no point. I mean, we basically need to be better meteorologists than them and not worry about what data they can and cannot see. So that was refreshing, and we were able to then, and at the time also the Weather Service had some arcane policies about not being able to take proprietary data either. But once the data crossed the university, then they could see it. And so we were trying at the time to route the radar data to the Weather Service at the time as well. That never fully panned out in the way we liked it, but at least we're going to try it. Nowadays, things are a little bit different, and the whole idea of sharing data and public-private partnerships is much more, what do you say? People like it than before.
When I think of you, I think of the chat.
Yeah.
So take us back. Uh-oh.
So the unabridged history.
I hear laughing there.
We all know where this
evil laugh in the back.
I think where this is going, and it ends with Troy Kimmel getting his hair standing up on end.
I'm trying to engage Troy here, Nate. Let it go.
All right, we go back to hotel brains, I think. All right, so
be less controversial.
The year was 2004. I was in Alabama for a weather conference, and two meteorologists from the Birmingham office, Darren Jones and the other guy, I'm forgetting his name right now, were presenting how they were using, I think it was Yahoo Messenger to communicate with the Weather Service. And I believe that some folks in Texas at the time were doing it as well. And it was interesting and neat, but there were some crazy limitations. For example, you only could be in one chat room at once. And so what they were doing is they were creating one monster chat room, and then anybody that wanted to come in there and chat could go in that room. And then you were having to install Yahoo's Messenger client on these various computers that had like adware and stuff like that in it. It was like scary. But also what I saw was the Weather Service folks were talking about how they were using it, and they were showing basically that they'd go to AWIFS, put in the warning, and then move over to their Windows PC and type in the warning as well into the chat, into Yahoo. And I was like, wow, this isn't very scalable and it has a lot of issues. And so we came back to Iowa in over 2005 and 2006, worked with some folks and came up with what eventually became NWS Chat, and was basically built on what's called Jabber or XMPP protocol, which is basically an open source, open standard message passing protocol. And so we went through many iterations with the Weather Service and incarnations of what it was called and who was running it. And I was the benevolent dictator for a while. And then finally, I think it was like 2008 or 2009, something like that, the Weather Service finally took it on. And they kept me on as a contractor to try to keep it going. And then, it went into the Weather Service and it just kept going downhill. And so, worst come to worst, in about 2017, I threw up my hands and said, whoa, you guys, I can't take this anymore. And I wasn't even under contract at the time, so I just went away. And that's the sad history of that. And so NWS Chat has basically suffered from more or less everything else that the Weather Service's IT suffers from, which is poor management, poor implementation, poor services, poor network. And we can go on.
You covered a lot of ground there. That's 4 major
Yeah.
things. So is it getting any better? Are the prospects
No.
positive?
So they've been looking at, what I've been kept doing over the years, I continue to keep trying to approach them and help them through their troubles. They have basically come to the realization now that they want to have a either commercially supported solution, aka Slack, which is crazy expensive, or some sort of Slack alternative or Slack freeware version like Matters Most, or some other sort of commercial off-the-shelf software chat solution like that more or less has most of the functionality.
Like a Discord or something.
Yeah.
Well,
But,
I'm curious as to why, and you may not know this. I just, I know they use the Google suite for everything else. Google has a chat feature that seems to work reasonably well. I'm sort of curious as to why that's sort of, to me, that's sort of the natural. If you're going to go for something commercial, go for Google because it's there and they're already using it. They're already in bed with them. Because the big issue with Slack, and the reason that the stated reason we hear is that there's licensing issues, that Slack's terms and conditions, the feds have issues with it, and so they tell them not to sign, not to essentially click accept here on that. So I don't know. I'm sort of. It seems like they've already fixed that issue with Google. Why not?
Yeah,
Google?
I would not call Google's chat solution as being very good, and so Google has a lot of vaporware products, and that's one of the sort of downsides I've seen over the years with Google is that, wow, I mean, when we talk about Google Chat, what are you talking about? Are you talking about Hangouts? Are you talking about Google Apps for Hangouts? Are you talking about Google Chat something else? And so the whole issue of being able to federate with like Gmail users within the NOAA enterprise is an issue with that. The issue of how do you implement chat rooms within Google's chat is tough, and how you manage access to those chat rooms.
Fair.
And so and then plus for compliance, I think that right now NOAA's Google Chat is basically not logged.
So the Google Hangouts is the name that shall not be spoken on this show.
Yeah.
So any more references to that need to be deleted, because it took about 30 seconds to get you on tonight. It would have taken about 30 minutes to get you on under Google Hangouts.
I certainly don't remember those
problem
days.
Half the problem with Google is that they develop this stuff and then they just it goes away.
Is that like what vaporware is, or is
Google Wave? Google Wave was a pretty interesting product. Gone.
Or Google Wave,
this email client, gone. It's so if you start using it, there's no telling if it's going to be there in the next 6 months or 3 months or even the next week. It just goes away. So they've got a problem, and I agree with Daryl. What is their messaging strategy, their chat strategy? Who knows? It is the most bizarre, discombobulated series of these. I don't even understand it. So, Slack to me, it's just what it needs to be. And I know
you said it was expensive, Daryl, but the Weather Service in Birmingham, told us all to get on their Slack deal, and we all did, and it was really important, on our event on March 27th. Well, I guess it's
expensive when you either have to have some sort of single sign-on, which I'm sure the feds would require for their employees, or if you want to log anything more than like 10,000 messages per Slack workspace, and you'd want to have a singular workspace for all this, because otherwise, a single any one person, like my last television market where I had 5 different Weather Service offices, I'd have to have a separate account for all 5 of those workspaces. And you're not getting any logging. So to get all that into one thing and all that kind of stuff. And I can tell you, I mean, it's very expensive to do that. We've had to look at that at my day job. It's a very nice product. I mean, it works very well. And I think the integrations are really easy. We could we could take NWS bot, and do some really, really cool stuff with it, in the future. But to Daryl's point, it is not cheap.
So Daryl, the Weather Service in Birmingham went to Slack briefly. Comment on that. You don't really have a dog in the hunt anymore, and you get to say what you think.
Well, I wrote my bot for it even. So
there you go.
So So let me connect one dot here. So NWS chat still exists. It's NWS's baby now, but IEM chat still exists, and it's sort of called weather.im right now. So you go to weather.im, more or less you see all of NWS chat's tools, but it's only for the public, or it's for public use. Anyway, so I still have the bot, which I continue to develop, and I wrote just a simple integration with Slack and just to push messages to it. And Birmingham was testing out two options. One was my integration with pushing from an IM bot, and the other one was scraping from Twitter from my bots on Twitter. So it was like 10-1 or 6-1, half dozen the other. I don't know. I continue to develop. So NWS Chat's code base is still more or less being developed, but I don't know what's going to happen within IEM Chat.
Daryl, let me. I want to kind of hop in for a second. Let me tell you that I have never, and I'm not. Daryl's not paying me money to say this, but I've never known anyone that can find data like Daryl can, and I don't know why Daryl hadn't had me killed. All of you. Why hadn't you had me killed? I mean, I asked Daryl.
Because we love you.
The last time I asked Daryl a question about this was earlier today, and so he's always there, and he's always can go and find that stuff. And I tell you, he's a great friend, but he knows what he's doing. Daryl, help me out here because I'm an IT idiot. What's the fundamental problem that when I use Pigeon for NWS chat, there's not a big problem with that, apparently. I never have used the damn web-based stuff. It's a pain in the butt.
Right off that too.
It is the Weather Service. I don't know who the heck built that, but Pigeon works fine. It holds up. But I'm just telling you, the web-based stuff that's what's slowing things down, right?
Well, okay, so there's two. So what plagues NWS chat right now is that the web chat, yes, it is intensive on their servers. Intensive from the fact that every one user of the web-based version ties up in what's called an Apache server slot on their web farm. Their web farm is shared between like forecast.weather.gov and NWS chat.weather.gov. And so NWS chat gets routed to about 4 nodes right now that are shared with those other services. The nodes themselves are only configured for something like 4,000 slots per node. And so during the heavy usage parts of the day, when Weather Service is either on a shift change or when forecast.weather.gov gets loaded up, those nodes slow way down and they become unavailable for new requests. There's also a bottleneck between how this gets really technical in the weeds, but with how that traffic gets from Apache's web servers to the OpenFire XMPP server. It has to go through this really crufty and old Python middleware layer, and that creates a problem too. And so, but this is all like 2005, 2008 technology. It hasn't gotten upgrades for 10 some years.
Well, the bad thing too is that once the web service gets dragged down, Pigeon gets killed with it, right?
Well, that can be a different issue, but
okay,
that's probably has to do with their backend database server getting overloaded. But
okay,
there, being so attached to the technology, when it fails, I can feel in my heart, what's failing. But in general, people using Pigeon for NWS chat do not impact NWS chat at all. They should not be being kicked off. It's the live users that would cause a performance issue, but it's nothing necessarily that has a problem with the technology. It's basically how they've configured that resource on their web farm.
Okay.
So have they reached out to you, Daryl, or have you offered your services? Because it sounds like you could give them a simple fix while they're trying to come up with a larger fix, which you can tell us what that should be. But I mean, has anybody even contemplated talking to you about it?
I've sent many emails. Let's say I don't know. I probably have burned some bridges at headquarters, so it's probably not helped me any. But the solution for this is 3 letters: AWS.
Yeah. Well, the thing that is interesting to me is I've also tried to get with Weather Service headquarters on issues like finding data on some of their websites, and it just seems like the Weather Service, if they cannot complicate the heck out of something, they're not happy. And I just wonder if that's part of the deal. I've talked to them, and they said we can't do that. And then I talked to Daryl, and he has it ready in 5 minutes through IEM. It's available in 5 minutes on the Iowa Environmental Mesonet, but I never get a response from Weather Service headquarters on how I can get a hold of a simple text product or something like that. And I've always thought that is what the fundamental problem is.
Well, that's more policy. I mean, one of the things that really handicaps the Weather Service website is that they have some strange policies about what has to go to NCDC, and so, or NCEI right now. And so SPC gets away with a lot of things that they're not supposed to get away with on their website, let's say. That's why SPC's website is pretty helpful and handy, because they'll ignore various policies that exist that they handicap weather.gov.
Kim's giving you the shh.
Yeah.
Hey,
That's awesome.
Yeah, the call will be coming down tomorrow. So Daryl, when they have this call talking about throttling, users and stuff, what are you yelling at the computer screen?
So
I could hear Daryl screaming from Iowa when that call was on.
So
Show title: I could hear Daryl screaming from Iowa.
That's it.
You're welcome.
it's kind of like the humor saying I'm sitting here in the middle of a cornfield, just whatever. Anyway, so fundamentally, their narrative is that we're out of bandwidth, right? Mm-hmm. If their narrative is we're out of bandwidth, the number one plot you produce in any sort of webinar or whatever is a plot showing that you're out of bandwidth. They don't have such a plot. What they have is a bunch of equipment that gets overloaded with what bandwidth they're getting currently. And so what they've done is basically they've tried to, they naively look at their web logs and see all these requests being made, and they don't realize that the people are doing the right thing, which is using range-based HTTP GETs on their GRIB filers. And so there's ways to, on their large GRIB files that exist with the model data, and the big issue is the GFS mostly, is that you can make special requests to the server and get small chunks out of it, like specific grid fields out of GRIB files. But when you do that, you generate a lot of requests, right? And so even, I didn't think myself personally be impacted by the throttle, but I found out I was hitting it. And how was I hitting it? I was trying to download one HER run for 24 forecast hours, 6 different grids in those 24 files. So there's 120 some requests, and then I made in 1 minute, but I was trying to be good and only download the data that I need. And so what's happened is all these people that were trying to do the right thing and only download small bits of the GRIB file are now downloading the entire GRIB file in parallel. And so what they do is, and I know people that are doing this right now, is instead of making 120 requests for small chunks of data, they're making 20 parallel requests for the entire GRIB file. And so they basically shot themselves in the foot here, because they're exploded their bandwidth usage by cutting down on the nice requests. Now, I'm sure that there are a couple of bad actors out there that had some naughty scripts that were, that could have been overloading the servers, because what's happening, is the high frequency trader folks are out there grabbing the GFS as fast as they can get it. And so as soon as they think the GFS is hitting their file server, the website, they're hitting it every second, give me the GFS, because they're literally high frequency trading off of what the GFS forecast hour 200 says, right? And so those types of requests are the ones, that maybe they're problematic, but in web world, those types of requests are really cheap to facilitate. So they shouldn't be what's dragging down the server.
Well, the wild thing is that just weather.gov is like 25 HTTP requests that, you download a single web page, every image, every piece of image, every style sheet that tells the page which bot to use, all of those generate their separate things. And so if you take the throttling, the original proposal of the throttling, literally, you couldn't have two people on the same network download weather.gov in the same minute without one of them getting rate limited. And then on top of that, a lot of companies, the one I work for being one, but lots of companies, whether they're broadcast companies or private sector or anything, funnel all of this through a single, what appears to them as a single IP address. And so it's not just one person on one computer, but I've got 100 meteorologists across the country. And so, going to, the Hurricane Center page to look for the latest update on whatever tropical system is out there. If I have 2 meteorologists hitting the page at the same time, the whole network gets shut out. And that's before you get into actually downloading data, which is the really bandwidth intensive stuff.
So let me interject one thing there in defense. So right now they've only limited to the Nomad site and the FTP PRD site. Those two sites are only ones subject to the limiting. Weather.gov. That's not what
the original proposal was.
Right. I think they realized their folly of the ways, because that was going to knock out their new radar website too. Now the thing you got to remember is that the thing you have to remember is that weather.gov still runs on their old web farm, and so that's outside of this IDP system. And so weather.gov is not subject to this.
Yeah. So what are they? Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Daryl.
Well, there's a whole bunch of systems that have yet. So IDP was like the Borg ship that was supposed to assimilate all of Weather Services IT, but it hasn't fully assimilated everything yet, including things like forecast.weather.gov, weather.gov, and then like NWS chat is still not assimilated yet. But they have assimilated radar.weather.gov, or at least the parts of it. But so yeah, I mean, and it's just, I just wish that they would, if they're out of bandwidth, show us you're out of bandwidth.
So has the process of putting the radar on AWS worked well? Have there been any hiccups with that?
I'm not. If you're talking about the level 3 and the level 2 products, my understanding is that there've been a pretty good success with that, but that was never really a performance issue on IDP as far as what they're trying to offload. What they've announced recently within the past 2 weeks was basically having the full GFS, RAP, HER, and NAM on AWS and Google and others. Now, the one analysis that I've seen of this is that the high frequency trader folks have looked at this and said, yeah, this is neat, but they have noticed occasional big latencies show up. Like one GRIB file got wrote 100 seconds too late versus what was available on FTP PRD. And so they basically said, well, we can't do easy AWS now because it's too late. So
let them pay for it. They're making money
that's
off
my
of
point,
it.
Nate.
I mean,
so
I remember once upon a time.
Yeah, let's go down that trail.
I mean, once upon a time, there was family of services. There was a cost sharing thing. And if you wanted, and separate from that, there was craft at OU. If you wanted the level 2 data, that was the original when level 2 data came out. It was like you could buy everything the weather vendors could possibly sell you for like $500 a month. And then if you wanted one level 2 site, it was going to be $1,000 a month, because that was the cost sharing of getting all of this data off of the radars and piped through craft. And then eventually there were 4 of them, and it was all still very expensive. I understand that they don't want to go down that road, and I get it. I don't want to pay for it either. But at the same time, if you're using it beyond sort of the basic level, I mean, there's, I don't get to ride the bus in New York City for free. I have to pay. I have to have a Metro card to swipe to get on the bus. So yes, the infrastructure is paid for, but you pay as you go. And I don't think there's anything I don't think there's anything wrong with that necessarily, unless you get to the point where the free server is just so badly pounded that there's just nothing left, and you have to pay for it. I mean, I don't want to freeze out people, the folks that are experimenting and doing. But I mean, clearly, if you're day trading or high frequency trading, you're not doing this for fun. You're doing it with a pecuniary interest, and I think that's that to me. When we download data for our internal ensemble that we run at NBC, we'd be okay paying a little bit for that, because we are downloading. Now, granted, we're doing it, Daryl, the way you're supposed to do it, where we're only grabbing the fields and the time periods that we want, all that kind of stuff. We've done that math to figure it out. But I think that's one of these things where, I would be willing as a company to pay for that in order to ensure that it would be there and be reliable, and we're not going to get rate limited because somebody's pounding the server because it's 100 seconds too late.
So is what they're doing, Daryl, or go down that road, go down the pay road, because I know you have.
Yeah. So every time I've talked to lawyers about the pay road is that they do not want to do it at all. And the reason is because of SLAs. They don't want to have to live by an SLA, right? And they don't want to be in the business of collecting money. So yeah, if you want to pay $500 a month for this, that's fine. But then I assume you're going to want some SLA with that for delivery, right? They do not want to be in that business.
Or if you want, put it out there on the FTP server for free. And then people who want it faster, make it so that it's getting to AWS and Google. And then if you want it for free, you get it faster and you pay the cloud exit charges for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately that's
Google
what
and
their goal
Amazon
is,
are
right?
very much set up to take your money. They will be happy to take your money.
Right now, the cost, those data sets are made free by those quote unquote free, because they believe they're basically cost recovering from compute resources against those data sets. And so like like for example, AWS's big data contract, they review it every 3 years or something like that to make sure that the data sets that AWS has, they're getting used locally so they can cost recover that. But I think for the weather service perspective, they just want to find a way somehow, some crook or by hook, to get that data onto the cloud as fast as they can get it onto FTP or PRD and be done with it. And just say, cloud providers, this is in your hands now. But until they get to that point, people are not going to be happy with what's on the cloud.
Can they just run the models in the cloud and then the data's already in the cloud and then it would take longer to get to FTP PRD? Problem solved.
Stop making sense.
A lot of money been spent on supercomputers probably prevents that from becoming a deal. So the plan as it's coming, Daryl, is it good? Is it bad? Is it how far out is it?
It's just going to take a while. Ultimately, they just have so much. They have so many models that they try to run on their systems and try to do a good faith effort to put out on the website. It's just crazy the amount of churn that they have to put up in every day. And in their defense, what they've really suffered from is they've had a lot of brain drain, and so a lot of their knowledgeable network and IT folks are turning over, within years. And so you have no institutional knowledge about how things work. And a lot of these folks aren't like most of us in this room, where we can bridge the meteorology and computer sides, so to speak. They're either one or the other. And so if you're a pure computer scientist and you don't have no idea what the HER is, you have no idea that that it updates every hour or that it has all these fields, or so it's really hard.
Well, let me ask you a question, Daryl. The people in Washington, I really don't know this. I've heard a couple of things. The people on the IT side for the Weather Service in Washington, are they largely contract employees, or are they actually Weather Service employees?
I believe it's mostly contract.
That's what I know. There are people, I realize there are people that are willing to take that's why they're being drained out of there, because the Weather Service is not probably paying for those positions.
I think it's just a burnout.
Yeah.
You look at how many tickets get created every day within their ticketing system, and you think, you always think that the tickets that you're generating with them are, knowledgeable and useful, but I'm sure they're getting tons of, just crazy, people in their basement, teenagers, whatever. Anyway, it's tough. And ultimately, I think the ultimate issue that they have is that they don't have enough Cisco engineers. And so they don't have enough expertise in networking, because a lot of what you see for errors and stuff are network failures. Some NAT gateway is broken, some peering is not working, some route is not going right.
But I would argue you don't need a meteorology degree to know what that is. I would rather, it seems like, on the tech side, a degree in computer science, I said this on a promo video I did for NC State 15 years ago. The degree in computer science is like an MBA for the 21st century. It doesn't matter what business you're in. The skill set can apply equally well in all of them. And so long as you're not the one, the computer scientists that really need to know the meteorology are the ones building the models, running the models, managing the supercomputers that run those models. But on the distribution side, to your point, that's just pure network engineer expertise. That's right, certified network engineer type stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Nate, I agree that we share the same birthday, Nate.
Well, I mean, where am I wrong with that? I mean, if that's off the rails.
Well, I think that the problem is that we have a fire in our bellies every day about making things work when it hits the fan. And if you're a professional Cisco engineer that doesn't care that it's a high risk day, and you just see a priority 1 ticket come in and say that somebody can't download the HER, I have nothing personally invested in making sure this network route works today.
Other than your paycheck.
Well, if you're a Cisco engineer, you can go write your own paycheck anywhere you want, right? So
that's true. That I doubt that the weather service is going to be able to compete with the Amazons and the Microsofts and the Googles of the world when it comes to that. So that, put all the metrics you want on it. So what? I don't meet it. I can meet them over here and make twice as much.
So Daryl, it's obvious that this is going to become a rant show. You watch a complex of thunderstorms, you think maybe it could become a derecho. I think we watched the show tonight. We realized this is a rant show, and we're pegging the weather geek meter at the same time.
It's good to get it out at $7.99 so we can go into 800 with a fresh start.
That's a good idea, Nate. That's really good. So I'll just pick some rants that you could start on. We mentioned the radar page. That's an easy one. Talk about that for a minute.
I don't use it, so all I hear is occasionally.
Me either.
So neither do we.
I mean, I was sort of in on the Ridge 2 project 15 years ago, and I don't know, when I looked at their preview one, I sort of said, "Whoa, this isn't built to scale, and this isn't really Akamai friendly." And so I don't know what they were up to with it, but I'll outside of the UI issues, I can't program my way out of a wet paper bag for UI, so I just more care about whether it's going to scale or not. And there were just issues that they were never going to scale out of the box. It gets really technical. And one of the issues was the WMS get capabilities request that came back as like a 200 kilobyte XML file, which you could, if you looked at like the web browser performance, you would see it grind at that point when it had to chunk through that thing. And it's like, oh, that's going to kill the site. But otherwise, I mean, I don't really want to rant about that.
Yeah. All
right, let's go to storm-based warnings.
I was bringing that one up next. So let's go to storm-based warnings. I know that's a favorite subject of yours, so let her rip.
All right. So one of my favorite rants about this is that, tell me right now, Bill, where you're sitting, are you under a tornado warning?
No.
How do you know?
Because about 50 things in this office would have gone off.
How do you know? How do you not know that those 50 things are down?
Yeah, that's a good point.
There is no product out there that says you're not under a tornado warning, right? And so that's the fundamental problem of warnings. It's only when it's on. Now let me ask you this question. What is the forecasted high temperature for you tomorrow? Based whatever, NDFD, whatever.
Okay.
You know that answer.
72.
Yeah, that answer is prescriptive. The Weather Service describes that all the time. You know what from the NDFD grids, you know what the forecast is for the high temperature amount. So you always can authoritatively answer that question because there's a grid and you know it exists, and it basically there is the answer. So that's really my gist of what I think what should happen with the warning system is that it should go to an NDFD style grid. And at that point, you can define over that grid all kinds of different threats, time horizons, whatever else, and get away from this binary on or off warning. Now, for people that still want to have warnings, and this is sort of like a software perspective, then you could always have software defined warnings coming out of a grid style thing like that. And at that point, you're sitting there and you know from a weather vendor perspective, these weather vendors would eat this style of data up because that's what they want to deal with, right? Because they have assets that are moving through a grid or some sort of threat or some sort of polygon for their area or whatever else you want to describe it. They want to look at some sort of grid of data from a computer's perspective and be able to do things like modeling of threats and whatever else. And you can't do that with the current system because it's these binary on and off polygons that you have to hope all these various different dissemination systems work.
And aren't you kind of describing facets, Daryl?
Yeah, I mean facets, but the implementation of facets has always been shoehorning it back into the warning text, right? And so you'll see some implementations of it. There'll either be some local area grid domain that gets shoehorned back into the warning text, or it'll be some sort of how else you describe it, like some sort of geo-referenced grid or something like that. I don't know, but what I'm talking about is a CONUS wide, consistent, regular grid that is updated instantly all the time, and basically, your threats are. For example, one of the things that's always bugged me about products is that, like, you can't just go out and say, where are all the tornadoes on the ground right now? Or where does the Weather Service think that all the tornadoes are on the ground right now? There is no product for this. There's LSRs that are delayed or that are points in time, but there should be a grid that basically says, okay, here, and you could do like some sort of like 80% confidence, whatever else you're going to do, radar derived product. But the grid would basically tell you, you could look at that grid and see, oh, here's 10 points where the Weather Service right now thinks that there's a tornado threat. You can't do that with anything that they have right now, but the technology exists to do there. Let's look at MRMS. MRMS is basically a step in this direction, right? Because it took all these disparate radars, put them on a consistent grid, and produced a whole boatload of interesting products off them, like shear, VIL density, whatever else products you want to get. The same thing should exist for warnings. And you can imagine what the weather vendors, the industry could do with those products. It would be amazing.
All systems, we engineered one at my last shop because we didn't like any of the vendor solutions, and we had a crawl system that did for news and everything, and it fed our website and whatnot. So essentially, we had to generate, based on warning text that came in, we had to maintain our own database of which counties in our viewing area were under a warning at any given time. It would get updated anytime a message came through, but we were counting on the Weather Service to all the VTech headers and all that stuff to be correct, to not be botched, for us to not miss one, for one to not come through twice, that kind of stuff. And those are the kinds of things that, if you look at the test suite that our developer at the time built, there were 60 or 70 different things. A lot of them were things like a misplaced asterisk or something that they'd engineered a way around it to detect that. But there were more than a few of those that were handling a sequence of warnings that came through where one of the VTech headers that we expected didn't come through. And that was just that I'm surprised he had any hair left when he left, because I pulled all mine out.
Yeah, I'm with you there, Nate. My GitHub repo for my open source Python library for parsing all this NWS text has something like 200 some VTech sequences and individual text products that are variances that I'm trying to account for. And I also have a Google Doc where I've referenced out like 500 some variances now that I've documented the Weather Service of these
variances
things.
Is a polite way of saying.
Well, okay, so here's my rant about this, right? Weather Service, for all their, this is my big problem with AWEBs too, right? They never ever occurred to them that we should parse our own product before we disseminate it, right? When we produce a warning, whatever, we should be able to parse it first before we expect the weather industry to disseminate it. That's not the way they do business. They put it out there and say, well, if it failed for you or failed for some of you, that's your problem, right? And maybe if you send us an email, we might look into it and fix it. That's crazy talk, right? You got it. If you can't parse it yourself and digest your own, you can't eat your own dog food, so to speak. Why do you expect the whole industry to do it? But it's always been a garbage in, garbage out dissemination process, policy. And so they would never have a software system stop a product that they thought was not well formed before it goes out to the world. And that's why, test tsunami warnings can go out, in real time without any sort of QC blocking those. They just will not do that because they're so worried about a false positive once, like having a software bug that falsely stopped a tornado warning before it went out. That's what they would kill them. And that's what is ultimately, right, the Weather Service's #1 problem is if Congress calls them in to testify. And so if you can avoid that.
Well, look at Facebook and Twitter. I mean, how many times has Zuckerberg been in front of Congress to testify? Nothing's changed. So,
well, they don't control his purse strings, though.
Well, that's true.
But Daryl, you're talking about this new set of grids that would be the warnings, and like James said, it does sound a little like fastest. But if you did that right now, how much would you increase the NDFD? Would it be 25%, 20%, 80% to be able to do that?
Like the grid size would be?
Like data points, yeah. and
whatever they
times.
want to, if they want to do, if they want to do 200 meter or 100 meter or whatever you want to do. I don't think it matters. We're talking the volume sizes on this, would be a drop in the bucket compared to GFS, whatever. If you look at, and their primary dissemination system, NOAA port, right? When you measure the NOAA port data rates, this would still be a drop in the bucket, even at like a 100-meter grid. If we're doing like every 30 seconds, 100-meter grid, like 10 to 12 fields.
Share your winery example, Daryl, because I thought that was very appropriate.
Yeah, so right now, the threat levels on the warnings are, 1 inch hail, 58-mile-an-hour winds, right? But what if you're sensitive at something lower than that? What if you have a tent set up that's sensitive to 35 miles an hour? What if you have a vineyard that's sensitive to 1/4? So what happens? So what ends up happening is that if a local weather service office knows about your event or has a large enough contingency within their WFO CWA border, they end up putting out special products. Like you'll see some offices put out specially worded SPSs to cover certain types of threats that they know are going to impact a lot of their, like a ranchers or whatever else. And so you get all these, pigeonholed sort of cookie cutter, solutions for local solutions. Instead, what if you had a grid, nationwide grid, like MRMS more or less provides now, that basically says max hail threat size, right? And it's always defined. But that's, that's sort of a nowcast. It's not a forecast at this point, but I'm talking about a forecast. And so then if you're a weather vendor, you could be creating products for these people. And the weather industry is already doing this more or less.
And you don't have to worry about your one grid, your grid point, all those different products, and just pull out the ones you need against your threshold.
Yeah, if you're sensitive to a certain threshold for temperature, certain threshold for wind chill, certain threshold for hail, certain threshold for lightning density, whatever else, why should the weather service have to produce a warning product to cover you? Just produce the grid and let the weather industry handle it for you. Because obviously those people are in sensitive situations that will pay, a vendor to be providing products. Joe Sixpack doesn't want to go out there and download a grid file onto their phone to do this work. If Joe Sixpack wants to be alerted that, a 30-mile-an-hour gust is coming through that can knock over whatever else they got set up, they're going to pay somebody to do that. It's not a problem.
So Daryl, talk about warnings performance in different offices, or can we go there?
I mean, I don't. So my website's got the IEM cow, which a lot of you've seen.
And that comes from your dairy farm background, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I wrote it back in 2003 or something like that. Anyway, it was basically a mashup. It was basically when storm-based warnings were getting implemented, and I think Nate, you were at that meeting we had in College Station. Like maybe Troy was there too.
December 2006.
Yeah, when they implemented. And I was curious because at the time, some of the weather industry was concerned that the polygons would get huge, and that offices would just issue massive size polygons to carpet bomb a threat, and then hope for hits within it. And the weather source of performance metrics were never going to add any sort of size penalty to their metrics, right? It's all about POD. And so if you want a good POD, you just issue massive warnings, size warnings, right? So, but the weather service management sort of said, well, we'll cover this in training, and we think the weather service offices, will try to be diligent about issuing small warnings. Now, I think that's generally what's happened, is that offices have been diligent about putting out small warnings. But there are a number of offices, and these offices will admit who they are, that issue storm-based warnings always to the county border. And so no matter what the threat is, the warning goes to the county border. And it's just because of two things. Either one, their emergency managers have told them that that's what they want. They want the polygons to line up with the county border, so there's no ambiguity about it. And two, there's no penalty for doing it, and they don't want to be issuing multiple warnings within a single county. And getting back to a ranting mode here, if I'm not already, let's have a quiz and review. How do you cancel a storm-based warning or a part of a storm-based warning? What's the only way to cancel a part of a storm-based warning? Come on,
reissue it in an SVS.
No. How do you cancel part of a storm-based warning? Come on, guys and ladies.
You continue it and you reduce the area.
You reduce area how? You drop a county.
Oh.
The only way the warning text will say cancels is if a county gets dropped, right? So an original polygon covers 2 or more counties. The only way text comes out that says the part of the warning has been canceled is if it leaves a county, right? Because they can shrink the boxes down as the warning goes on.
And they just get
so
a
that's the only way
continuation in that situation.
Right. And so they don't want to have the confusing message to emergency managers where they're getting 2 warnings, simultaneous warnings in the county for maybe perhaps different storms. One of the storms has left the county and that polygon gets tripped out of that county, which means it gets canceled for that county. And so then it becomes confusing because the emergency manager looking at the county says, oh, my warning just got canceled. No, it's still going because this other warning is still active for that same county. And so that's one of the reasons why some offices are aggressive about drawing all their warnings to the county border. In my opinion on the situation is go for it. This is the hell you live in or the bed you have made, so lie in it, right? I don't think it means you're a lazy meteorologist, and I don't think it's bad service. Ultimately, the storm-based warnings are tied to the UGC codes. And until that changes, you cannot fix this situation. So if you yeah.
Go ahead, Daryl. I don't
know. If this is a way that reduces confusion within your CWA with your partners that are on board with this, what's the problem? Go for it. Do it. But the issue is that there are NWS managers that come in and say, no, we are 100% storm-based warnings nationwide. All our offices issue storm-based warnings.
Except they can't if the storm pops up adjacent to a CWA boundary. They can't do that. So it's not storm-based.
Or if it's on a marine zone, or or if it's on a river that cuts 2 states and cuts, crazy. The initial implementation, you couldn't have that polygon edge, slop over top the border, and you get to the implementation, like if you're in the polygon or not, is there any sort of a slot factor to that polygon edge? Any ideas? No, nobody really knows. No. Some people say you really should be buffering those polygon borders out 5 kilometers every time just to do it, right? Or a couple kilometers.
I remember we had that conversation too at one point about one of the delivery services that was one of the first ones that was based on the storm-based polygons, and like, should we pad that? And the answer we came to was no, because the warning is the warning is the warning, and so long as we're passing that as cleanly as we can, then there's no sort of quibble. But if we somehow padded it, then that's a judgment call. We've decided to pad it X kilometers, and then that becomes we should have padded it Y, when at which point we just pass on the Weather Service warning unvarnished and let it go.
So what was happening was that you plotted up all the storm-based warnings over the first 5-10 years of the program. There were lots of spots in the country that would never ever get a warning because of their orientation within the CWA and the orientation within a zone or a county. It's like one of them, the famous one is what Missouri looks like. The far northwest corner of Missouri, that little knob that sticks out, there was no way for the Weather Service to issue for that corner. They could never have gotten a warning. Nowadays, what they can do is the polygon can actually slop out 5% of the next neighbor's area of that county. And so they can actually issue a polygon that goes slightly outside of their own county without lighting up that county. And so that was sort of the way around that, so that everybody in the country could actually get a warning.
So Daryl, there seemed to be a problem in complex counties, that maybe bordered with rivers and things and jagged edges like Jefferson County and Shelby County in Alabama.
Dare County, North Carolina.
And the polygons would never line up exactly because you couldn't create enough points, I guess, to do that.
Right.
Talk about that issue. Is that being solved or?
No, that's a software issue. So there's 24 points. They're only allowed 24 points per polygon. And the polygons have 0.01 degree resolution. And so when you have those 2 combinations, you just can't draw them out, to that border. You can't represent that border at that resolution and that many points. And so that's what you're left with.
Another point for your grid-based warnings, for sure. I went back and read Mike Smith's book again because we've got a show coming up on Joplin. And he proclaimed that impact-based warnings were going to be the death of us all. do you think it's really been that bad, or critique impact-based warnings? I see some benefit from them and, enjoy using them, but take the contra to that.
So the impact warnings, what they're trying to do. So we need to first define what a difference between a product and data is, right? Weather service warnings are products. And what does that mean? Products mean that actual data is marked up around containers. And so within the text file of the weather service warning, there are certain, tags or bullets, whatever else you want to call them, where they're trying to point people with parsers to look specifically for to find data, right? And this is the crazy mentality, right, of how this works. So instead of issuing a grid or a data product for impact-based warnings that actually has the data, which is like the max hail size or what the threats are or what the expected damage is, instead what they had everybody in the weather industry do is write more text parsing to look at specific bullet points within brittle, bullet points that may or may not have 3 ellipses or whatever else you want to have to find data to then make actionable products off, or actionable alerts, whatever you want to call it, off of. And so that's my fundamental issue with impact-based warnings. Instead of issuing the data, they issued another product, and they didn't actually, move the sticks any bit as far as being able to provide the weather industry data.
How much of this, and I'd love to get Bruce on, because I remember when we had that workshop in December, there was a lot of time. I mean, we were there, I think, a day and a half, and I think we probably spent 2/3 of that time trying to figure out how we shoehorn the round peg of, or the square peg of storm-based warnings into the round hole that was weather radio in a way that didn't leave weather radio behind, that didn't, because it is an incredibly valuable thing that the Weather Service provides, and we wanted to make sure that we didn't mess that up or jack it up. And as a result, and so I don't mean to focus this on weather radio, but it seems like there's so much about dissemination of products and data and the whole bit within the Weather Service that is very much tied to legacy ways of communicating. I mean, we're trying to going back to, instead of issuing a data grid that updates once a minute, we're issuing these products that have a 1-minute resolution that I have to then go through and sift to find the data out of it. I mean, how much easier would it be if we issued a shape file of the warning that has an unlimited number of points to it, that gets distributed, and then, phones and graphics displays and everything would have all that, just sort of at their fingertips.
Yeah, so my suggestion in this space has always been, when I have the Weather Service manager's ear, is that
you probably do hear whether they they might have turned you off by now, but
well, they've heard this rant before. But if they're, remember, because the whole issue of lowercase letters in products was the teletype in Guam, literally, right? There was a teletype in Guam that would break anyway. So the thing here is that if you're worried about the legacy products and breaking things downstream, just let software control generate the legacy products. Move the goalpost, whatever you want to call it, move the generation to a product that then generates out these legacy products. And so if you have whatever else you have downstream of you that you're worried about breaking and don't want to break, but you want to get rid of this text file, whatever, for the product, just let software generate the text file out of something else. Like what was done with the zone forecast grids, right? The ZFPs, the FAN sense files. That's software defined. Some forecasters not sitting there typing it. It's based off the NDFD, right? The NDFD is the grid, the data. That is a legacy product that's software control generated and goes out. The same thing could be done with local storm reports. The same thing could be done with warnings. The same thing could be done with all this other stuff, right? Let the weather industry get the data. And then if you still need to have these legacy text products go out, let software control do it.
Nate, you asked for Bruce and you got him, so.
Magic. It's like a genie in a lamp. I love
Ask
it.
and you shall receive.
So
it's just like,
Bruce, to bring you up to speed, we were, talking about, the way the Weather Service distributes products and everything. And back in 2006, in the eve of the storm-based warning era that started in 2007, one of the concerns that we spent there was a workshop, it was like a 2-day workshop. We spent 2/3 of it trying to figure out how to take all of the storm-based warning stuff and to fit it and to make it work in the paradigm that weather radio operates under because of, it's countywide activations and that sort of thing. And I worry that it's 2021. I don't know that we're any farther down that road in terms of that. And that's not a critique of weather radio or necessarily the Weather Service. I think it's sort of a broader critique of, Daryl, to your point, there was a teletype in one Weather Service office somewhere that it seemed like we're holding the whole industry back for something that, would cost some money. Let's just upgrade them and get it done. And then we can, move on as an industry. What in your mind, Bruce, what would, and I realize you're coming into this cold, but what would you do? Like if you could take a step back and redesign the whole thing from scratch, you've got an unlimited budget and you can just start over with weather radio and the Weather Service and the way we disseminate all of that. I've heard Daryl's version of it in terms of let's just create data products and then let software generate whatever else we need. Bruce, how would you redesign the Weather Service's dissemination within the context to make weather radio even better than it is now?
Well, first of all, interestingly, back in July 13th of 1999, the National Weather Service published a document called NOAA Weather Radio Transmitters Update number 4.43. It was published on July 13th of 1999. And basically, they were laying out the architecture of SAME, Specific Area Message Encoding, which was a big breakthrough at the time. Well, interestingly enough, for nuclear power plants who would eventually need to issue a polygonal plume warning for a radiation,
like the one I live about 4 miles away from, flies.
They included a technique inside SAME for issuing polygonal points through latitude and longitude numbers that can be issued inside the stream of the NOAA weather radio broadcast. Now, I personally think this is capable of being done right now. And in fact, I've got a little project going on right now.
Oh, do you? Tell us more.
How do we finally activate? And again, this was laid out in 1999. How do we finally activate this program that allows us to give out polygonal coordinates inside the SAME radio burst? Because they set it up so that it should be doable, but we've never instituted that, and we haven't put that into action yet. And I'm busy looking into that.
Bruce, is that part of the Las Vegas stuff where we're looking at where we're doing some testing out there?
It's kind of a little bit, but what we're doing in Las Vegas, when an SAME code always starts with the number 0. So you got 0, and then 2 digits identify your state, and then 3 digits identify your county. So it starts with a 0, 2 identifiers for your state, 3 for the county. That 0 means entire county.
Okay.
If you put a different digit in that first slot, like a 1, a 2, a 3, up to a 9, you can take a county and divide it into 9 sectors, and you can give out a more a finite tornado warning for that county, just for the northwestern corner of the county. And that's what's going on in Vegas now.
Las Vegas, to test with them.
Yeah, and as far as I know, every SAME radio that's in the field from any manufacturer right now should be capable of being reprogrammed with that first digit changed from a 0. So if they roll that out here in June, as we expect them to, the WFOs, the weather forecast offices, will get together with county emergency managers and decide, do we need to subdivide this county? And if so, how do we subdivide this county? Do you divide it based on a river, on highway, on a mountain range? How do you subdivide a county? And then finally, how do we tell the people we've subdivided their county and they can now change that 0 to a 1, a 2, a 3, and cut down on their overwarning. So that's step number 1, is the partial county alerting, which is coming. But what I'm talking about is actual polygonal warnings where the radio knows whether it's inside the polygon or not. and it'll go off only if it's inside the polygon, just like your cell phone does with a WIA alert.
And do you do that? Do you do that, Bruce? Like, I think we talked about this before, where you would just place a GPS, a chip in the weather radios, right?
Right. Yeah, you can do it that way, or you could have a Bluetooth inside the weather radio, and it just communicates with your cell phone. So your cell phone has a good lock on its location, and then that can communicate that into the radio. So you could do it one of two ways: Bluetooth or with a GPS chip. And
but those GPS chips, Bruce, you said it before. Correct me if I'm wrong, but those things are fairly inexpensive nowadays, right?
Yeah, for less than $4, we could put the components in a weather radio to put a GPS chip and antenna in the radio, and then you don't even have to program it. It knows exactly where it is, and it can really kind of program itself. So
can you build me one of those by tomorrow?
Yeah, prototype.
So
I mean, Daryl,
this handheld critter, with a GPS, I mean, you put a GPS chip in this, and this thing really, really, really becomes cool. I mean,
whether
cool
you really
now.
know whether you're in the polygon or not.
But yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean, you carry it around, and this becomes a replacement. I mean, you're in a place where you don't have cell phone coverage or whatever, but you probably have weather radio coverage, and you have this in your back pocket or your hiking bag or whatever, and you're good to go if you got a GPS chip in it.
So Daryl, how much data? I'm sorry, Troy. Go ahead.
No, I'm just wondering. I mean, Bruce, I know you representing Midland. Are we close to that happening at all? Getting those GPS chips in the weather radios? Never mind.
Yeah, actually, we've got something. We got a little prototype thing that's in the works. So, and James Spann mentioned this. After the 2011 Dixie Alley outbreak, we had to get together down in Norman. And James spoke very eloquently to this point. It was one of our 10 action points of that meeting. We've got to get polygonal warnings inside NOAA weather radio. And starting back in 1999, they laid down the roadmap for how that's possible to do it. We've just never really moved it that far forward. But I personally think if we don't do it, we've made a huge mistake.
But right now, the easy way to do that would be through the GPS, through the chip, right? That would be the easiest way.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be a no-brainer. And then you probably wouldn't even need to program a weather radio, because it would know by land, it would know what county it's in. It would know what transmitter serves that county, and so on and so forth. So
Daryl, how much data can we put in those little bursts? Is it extremely limited, or could it hold your threat column?
I honestly don't know.
Do you, Bruce, know how much data can be forced through that burst?
I think that you're limited to like a 3-minute burst, but I would have to ask smart guys like Craig Hodan or somebody at National Weather Service headquarters, or maybe one of my electrical engineers. But I think there is a limit to how long that burst can go.
So, Daryl, rant about verification of severe weather statistics real quick, because we don't want to miss that. And then I want you to do like a little Letterman top 10 of the coolest things that you have out there that people don't know about, or maybe not taking advantage of.
From the verification perspective, I really believe that Weather Service should be able to use radar as verification. And I think that it's interesting that the local storm reports are starting to do this now, where they'll have like radar confirmed tornado, something like that, as the source of the local storm report. But you have this great equipment and great algorithms that are producing, good data. I mean, if your algorithm is sitting there and telling you have a tornado, or you have 2-inch hail, and you issue a warning, why can't that be used as the verification for the warning, right? You're sort of like saying, it's sort of strange to say, like, if your observational tool, and of course it's not true observation of a tornado or true observation of hail, but if your observational tool is telling you this is happening, why can't you use it as the verification of your warning? So that's what I'll say about that.
All right. Anybody want to take issue with what Daryl said, or you okay?
I think it comes back to the fact that we issue warnings on signatures and not actual, meteorology, right? I mean, there's a Twitter thread by Jack Sillen earlier today about, doing a warning event simulation and just how difficult that was. And how he had a better respect for the folks in the hot seat having to do it. And in a lot of cases, you're having to make warning judgments on signatures that are related in a probabilistic fashion to outcomes on the ground. I mean, there's a large portion of North Carolina that is very far away from a radar site. And so you're having to make warning decisions at 2 a.m. based on a signature of something that's 5,000 feet off the ground. 9 times out of 10, that doesn't verify because you're looking at something that's 5,000 feet off the ground to try and connect that to something that's,
that's a software problem. That's a software problem.
How is that a software problem and not I need more radars problem?
No, but that's the definition, right? If you have a hole beneath the radar between that 5,000 algorithm and 5,000 return in the ground, your algorithm should be taking that into account, right? You shouldn't be issuing a warning just because the algorithm says there's 2-inch hail 5,000 feet off the ground. You should be issuing a warning because your algorithm says that 2-inch hail aloft is going to be an inch when it hits the ground. That's what I'm talking about for observation.
And I think the thing is, we don't, in some cases with tornadoes especially, hail's a little different. I think environmental cues and whatnot. Tornadoes are a lot trickier. In the sense that we're not that one-to-one correlation. Like you see a 3-body scatter spike in S-band radar returns, you've got inch hail at the ground, full stop, you're done. That I think is a verification. A lower, a correlation coefficient to a certain minimum co-located with high reflectivity and a couplet, boom, you're done. Those, I think I'm on board with that because we've shown the correlation to be very, if not one-to-one, very close. But to look at a meso 5,000 feet off the ground, 75 miles away from the radar, we're having to warn because that's the best thing we've got, and we have to make sure that the people under that are alerted. But at the end of the day, it may be in the middle of nowhere. Still got to issue the warning because that's what we do. But that correlation is very weak, but it's not zero, so it's enough that you got to trigger the warnings. That's not a software problem. That's we don't have the right observations, or we haven't figured out the right correlation to program into the software to be able to do that. But there's some of those questions I think that are not software problems because we don't have the science yet to make that correlation. We can code it all day long if we have the science to back it up. We just don't.
But Nate, there was and I bring this up, I'm not picking on any office or anything, but a week ago last Sunday night, we had the tornado that hit Tupelo, Mississippi. And that was based upon dual pole data, which was fairly impressive. What did it end up surveying? What did Gary and the people at Memphis end up surveying that for? They called it a catastrophic tornado. It was actually an EF1. That's how it verified on the ground. And so I guess, I would ask, I don't know. I guess,
but an EF1, that goes back to the whole, EF1 isn't measuring wind speed. We've had this conversation on Twitter. Yeah. It's not wind speed. It's about what it hits, what it strikes, what we choose. Now, admittedly, the part of Tupelo it went through, there was plenty of stuff for the tornado to strike. And this wasn't like it's chewing up, it wasn't like a 300 mile per hour tornado chewing up empty farmland.
Right.
So I think, but again, that sort of goes back to the probabilistic nature of some of these correlations. Yeah. They're not perfect. And a lot of that, there's variability based on how far away from the radar site you are, how high up the beam is, other environmental characteristics, that sort of thing, that I can't reduce that simply to software. I think there's some science gaps that we have yet to fill. But then there's that other piece of, at the end of the day, a lot of these correlations are based on damage, not necessarily straight up wind speed, which is a whole different critter.
So, Kim, you ask your question, then I want Daryl to give us his little Letterman look, and then James will ask all the hard questions. And I think Nate's got something he wants to add too. But Kim, you go.
Yeah, no, I'm asking this very naively. This isn't my area, but it strikes me that everything you guys are talking about, they're not being the science yet to do. In some cases, our field is moving toward trying to use AI systems where we don't necessarily have theoretical grounding, but there could be relationships derived that deep learning identifies and works with. Is this something that AI is possibly able to tackle for cases where, perhaps it's not all cases. Maybe, Nate, it is only in a subset of cases where we have radar in an area where you would expect there to be, for example, dual pole Doppler signatures where debris is pulled up to a high enough level where you could, maybe detect something. I'm not sure. Maybe it would only be imperfect or partial, but it's, I feel that in some of the areas where we have these notable gaps, we also have a great deal of tree coverage, and some of that does show up in radar. So I don't I asked this extremely naively, but to the point about it possibly being at least something that could be filled a little bit, a band-aid, with software. Is anyone aware if that's something that's being contemplated? I'm not sure. I look at sort of Daryl since you're Mr. Software,
Yeah.
this is something that can be used to train a software. What are your thoughts?
AI thinks it can do it, so let it do it.
Right? AI is very naive. AI is like, AI might tell us also this is a hot dog. It's very hard to make sense of.
AI is like me at the beginning of a semester when I was in college. Sure, I can take 21 hours. Let's do it. And at the end of the semester, I've been trained that no, I may not have made the right choice. That sounds like an AI kind of a thing. And one of the things that we talked about at NWA last year was and AMS, before that and since then, that, doing some sorts of, instead of doing some of the parameterizations and storm scale stuff, actually using AI to generate some of these things that we can do with a lot less computation, and then getting the results a lot faster. So essentially getting the same quality results that you get today, but in a quarter of the time or a quarter of the compute time. And then, refining from there. I think, again, the question is, do we have the scientific underpinning to trust it, and to trust it in a warning setting? And I think we'll get there. I don't know that we're there at this point, but I'm talking out of school a little bit. That's something I'm interested in, but I don't know much about. So I'm going to stop talking.
It just strikes me that where we don't have observations, that's something that AI might be able to help us with. It can make inferences, like you were saying, in maybe a probabilistic sense.
Yeah,
it can help us to make inferences, and maybe that's part of the beauty of it, is it wouldn't point to a deterministic solution, but something that's really interesting to me about working with warnings is I've been actually asking the question in some of my work, what is a warning? Because there's been this idea in introducing things like the probabilistic hazard information, these feed plumes that could go out ahead of a storm, estimating the likelihood of a tornado or severe thunderstorm downstream. There was this early idea that warnings would fall out at certain probability thresholds. And that when we put that before people like Troy and Nate, when you came to our test bed to test this out, it sort of didn't work out that way, because there were situations where you said, well, 70% just doesn't quite cut it in this situation. Or sometimes you'd be like, well, we've got to throw down at 30. And it turned out that some of the underlying reasoning behind that was societal. Warnings aren't just about objective hazard probability, but also about all these other things the forecaster is considering that I think they can observe. And what they're missing is this one piece, the likelihood of the threat. But that's not the be all end all to warning decisions. It could be that forecasters would want to hedge if they had something that could infer, well, perhaps the environment is like this, and our system says, therefore, it could resemble a situation, there could be analogs made to times where there were tornadoes observed. I don't know. I'm talking again out of my depth as well, but it's just from the warning decision process standpoint, that could be enough to be helpful.
One thing I love about this as an AI problem is, in order to train an AI, you need data. And holy moly, do we have that in spades. The question is picking the right data to put in and letting it figure it out and having it run. But I have two non-ranty, one of them's a rant. Daryl I think you're still a Cubs fan, last I checked. What's going on with our Cubbies this year? I know, I see the picture of Wrigley behind you. Only 500. What's going on here?
So here's what happened, Nate. After the World Series won, it was 100 years. I went to bed, and so I'm waiting 100 more years before I can start tearing again.
So you're probably right. So the other thing I want to end with, and it's completely not ranty at all, and I wish I still had it, but those of you who are lucky enough to know Daryl outside of all of this, get Daryl's Christmas letters. Now, some people you get the Christmas letter, right? And it's always the relative that has the famous son-in-law, or they've married into money, or they're traveling, and they live it was like the version of social media, the life we put on Facebook, that's so much better than reality. But that's what you get not Daryl. Daryl sends research letters. These are fantastic. Can you tell people about your Christmas without, you don't have to get into the details of what's in there, but how these are formatted? Because I love them. That's the one Christmas letter, I kid you not, I look forward to every year. I would pay for it.
I thought it'd be cool to use, for those who know LaTeX, just to use a LaTeX style file for like a journal article and basically write the Christmas letter using that LaTeX style file, and then include some graphics and a whole lot of tongue in cheek. So that's basically what I did.
And it's not just the style file, folks. These things, it's not just the way it's presented in terms of just the formatting and the font and all that kind of stuff, which, again, if you're familiar with LaTeX, if you're familiar with journal articles, it's immediately recognizable. But I love the fact it's all third person, passive voice. There's, there are references.
And my famous one was one year I took the previous year's Christmas letter and just did a correction where I took my pencil and wrote lines through words that were no longer right and corrected it, and then sent that out. So
Reviewer 2 must be stopped.
Reviewers 2, Christmas letter.
I look forward to those every year, and woe is me if I ever offend you or move without sending you an updated address, because those are the highlight of my December. I kid you not. Thank you for those.
All right, Daryl, I've got a quick question for you. So love the website. Obviously, it takes me a while to dive into it because I'm not as up to par with it as some of these other guys. But what do you think is the most underrated thing on your site that if, maybe I'm not as skilled as some other people, what is something on there that I absolutely need to get into?
It is the recently liberated data set of NWS text products between 1983 and 1991 or 2 or so. So I was able to liberate a binary data set from NCEI had, and there's a whole bunch of great text data from that period that just doesn't exist on the internet. And so you can go in there. And what I also did is, since back in that period, weather service offices look much different. There's weather at WSOs and other sorts of things, is I consolidated all the offices identifiers into the present day identifier. So if a WSO is now covered by some other WFO, you can use that WFO's ID to go back into the data mining thing and to go look at that product. Now, it doesn't actually change the text in the product at all. It is basically, it's a shortcut to find it. And on my website, if you go to the NWS data tab and go down, there's 2 different options there. One says NWS, one says text data by ID, and one says text data by center or something like that. And you go in there, and those are very deep rabbit holes. But it's cool because there's just stuff you just don't find anywhere, like Storm Prediction Center when they're in Kansas City products.
Radar summaries.
Yeah, radar summaries. I almost deleted those, and then somebody said, no, don't delete them. Yeah,
they're so worthless, but we love them.
Yes, somebody was paid, to sit at the radar and every hour put out what they saw on the radar summary.
And we were actually talking about this on Twitter earlier, and how cool would it be just to print out some of this cool, unique stuff and put in the weather office? I think that's fascinating. So thank you for that. That's awesome. And here's one that real quick, part of the one that Jeff Wilcox had sent to us from Twitter. Where was it? A tornado was sighted over Lake Tuscaloosa by several persons, including pilots of aircraft. A tornado was moving to the northeast at 50 miles an hour. That's from December 1983 from NWS Birmingham.
Yeah, I also enjoy having people go back to the big outbreak days and go read the morning forecast discussion.
Yeah.
And that's not a slight on the forecast office or anything like that, but just go read the morning forecast discussion for those big outbreak days and think about how much better our predictability is now than it was back then, or the day before even. Like, go read May 3rd, 99's AFD that morning or the day before. Anyway.
Hey, Daryl, I don't know if you guys talked about this earlier. I got distracted. The Weather Service, the radar on the web, that they went to this upgraded site in, I think, December of 2020. And this
Why
just
did they
didn't
do it in
work.
December 2020?
Yeah.
Why did they do it
this
then?
just didn't work.
Do you know why they did it then?
No, I have no idea.
What got killed in December 2020?
Oh, I don't know.
FLASH, flash.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So Flash
The
went
old-
off the browsers and all that stuff. Okay.
That's why this coincided, right?
So who's the guy behind this? I mean, who put this package together?
I don't know the current day developers of it. I don't know. I mean, to me, this has always been sort of a let the vendors do this part of the weather industry. I mean, because the composite, their baseline was to go to a composite, right? So when you first come on the radar, you get to the composite. Well, the composite's either based on GEMPAC or it's based on some other technology or MRMS even now. And I'm not sure which composite they're using for this off the bat. But I mean, when I look at this, I'm like, I see so much better presentations from AccuWeather and weather.gov or weather.com and other places. I just sort of wish the Weather Service wasn't in this game.
It's almost as if they're disconnected with people that they serve. And I've said this before. It's they sit in these rooms and they dream this stuff up without even thinking of talking to somebody in the real world in a Walmart or a Target or a Dollar General that's going to pull this up on their computer and think that it's horrible. I mean, where's the disconnect here? When did this happen?
Well, it started back in like 2003, and so, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm not going to be able to rant much on this one. I'm sorry, I let you down.
Go ahead. We're just talking between us here.
I know, but there's nothing. I don't really have anything to rant about. I'm not really. This is not a horse in my. I don't have a horse in the race in this case.
So you're the director of the National Weather Service. What do you do to fix all these issues you've talked about? I mean, what's your priority? Prioritize things.
I would put as much stuff in AWS as I could possibly get there immediately. I shut down IDP. The first place to disseminate anything from an end-to-end step is to AWS or to Google or all three at once. And those are the primary sources of data. If Weather Service wants to have their own branded data portal to their stuff, it needs to exist in the cloud. There's no point to have it in public.
What's the objection to going to AWS? Is it cost? I mean, is it pride or ego? I mean, what's the deal here?
It's somewhat cost because egress for a lot of that data is going to be pretty large as far as paying the bandwidth. But the real issue is manpower. You're going to be firing people, laying people off because they won't need them. You don't need to have a Cisco engineer when you're in the cloud. You don't need to have 10 people running web servers, system administrators when you're in the cloud. It's sort of like as the aside is like there's sort of like this ongoing issue about how AWS is like killing system administrators because suddenly you can run all you need to be able to do is run a web browser to be able to administer your AWS instance. You don't have to like have terminal, be able to log in a terminal. So it's a pride issue and you're losing people in your teams. And so, but the cost is there is a concern, but there's also a perception from the graybeards that the cloud can just go away or the cloud can just, not be operational at 2 a.m. for some reason. It's like a strange mentality.
What? I mean, I think the cloud is going to be a little more reliable than what the Weather Service is doing on their own. I mean, goodness. I mean, this is, how many big Fortune 500 companies use AWS? Don't most of them?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, you're not going to argue. I'm not going to argue that. So it just takes time.
Well, okay. And
there's a whole I built it here mentality. And plus there's a lot of confusion about what the cloud is. And I mean, if you got 10 AWS managers in the room, they probably couldn't define what the cloud was, right?
Probably. But anyway, we got to take a time out here real quick. Yep. We're going to go to Tony Rice and his astronomy report. We're going to come back with the weather roundup, picks of the week, and much more as WeatherBrains rolls along.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook.
Throughout mid-May, find a clear view of the western horizon, and you can see all 4 terrestrial planets at the same time. Mars is the highest one and is visible until around midnight. Below it, you'll see Mercury, which is more of a rare sight because it's most often hidden by the sun's glare. By mid-next week, Mercury will be at its greatest elongation, or separation in the sky from the sun, and at its highest altitude in the evening sky, making it easier to see. Low on the horizon, look for the much brighter Venus. Wednesday night this week, look for Venus less than a degree away from the waxing crescent moon. And to see that fourth terrestrial planet, just look down at your feet. You're standing on it. A bit of NASA history for today. 54 years ago today, the M2F2 lifting body crash landed at Edwards Air Force Base in California. This was the 16th and final test flight of this odd-looking aircraft, which was designed with the principle that the body itself provides the lift, rather than the wings, which it didn't have any of. Footage of that aircraft tumbling at 250 miles an hour across the California desert was included in 1973's TV movie, as well as the subsequent series, The $6 Million Man. The real test pilot, Bruce Peterson, was seriously injured in the crash and was in and out of the hospital for a year and a half undergoing plastic surgery. He later joked, "I don't think it cost any $6 million to put me back together." Peterson remembers very little about the accident. In 1975, he told the Associated Press, "About what is seen on TV screens each week is what I remember. I blacked out about the same time the camera stopped working." Peterson would go on to lead safety and quality assurance at NASA's Dryden, later renamed Armstrong, Flight Research Center at the Edwards Air Force Base. That's your Astronomy Outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokey for more spacey stuff like this.
Calling all weather enthusiasts. Join the American Meteorological Society by becoming a member of the band at amsweatherband.org. As an AMS Weatherband member, you'll get to go behind the scenes with the scientists of the American Meteorological Society, whose members have been at the forefront of weather, water, and climate research for over 100 years. You'll learn about the very latest research from the scientists who are actually doing it. What's more, you'll become a part of a passionate online community of weather enthusiasts. Get access to exclusive videos, webinars, and other fun content, and support the science you love. Learn more and join the band today at amsweatherband.org.
And we thank the AMS Weather Band for their sponsorship of WeatherBrains, and really outstanding program. We need to take a look at it. Bruce Jones, we've got you here tonight as we do every week because we also appreciate Midland, and you just re-up to the end of June, so we really appreciate that.
Yeah.
But you always lay some good weather nuggets on us every week as we're talking about weather radio.
Well, yeah, it's Hurricane Preparedness Week, so I want to remind everybody to have one of these emergency crank radios, because if you're evacuating from a hurricane and you need weather information, you need news from the AM channel, news from the FM channel, whatever you need, these are nice gizmos to have, and they have a super bright flashlight on them as well. So these are kind of one of those items that should be in everybody's go kit. This is 5 of the items you should have in your go kit: AM, FM, weather radio, flashlight, and you can recharge your smartphone by cranking the crank on there. So as we get ready for another hurricane season, hopefully it won't be as active as last year, but you know, there's always the predictions, and looks like this year the early season predictions are we are going to have a more active season. Please get ready now. Start making your plans, have a plan. And I can only encourage you to just have that go kit, have it ready to go at a moment's notice, because you never know when those forecasts will change, as we saw with Hurricane Michael a couple of years ago.
So Bruce, you got a special offer for WeatherBrains listeners that need to get that crank radio.
Yeah. 25% off when you use the promo code SPAN25. That's SPANN, SPAN25. Use that promo code at midlandusa.com, and you can get 25% off of a weather radio, including these crank radios, or a desktop version, whatever. 25% off all the weather products and accessories with the promo code SPAN25.
And we appreciate that, Bruce. Did James leave us? James, did you want to do the weather roundup and all that good stuff?
I got about 5 minutes here.
Okay, I do it.
So we'll do a quick weather roundup here. So let's go down to Austin, Texas. Troy, you got a cool front coming in, don't you?
Yeah, it's just south of us. Right now, it's down on the north side of San Antonio. They're in the upper 70s. We're in the actually mid 60s here in Austin. We've got a very shallow wedge of cooler air situated overhead. We have what seems like an endless stream of upper air disturbances to the west. So we do have rain in the forecast the next couple of days. Notice the tornado warning out of New Braunfels, out of the Austin San Antonio office down along the Rio Grande in the last hour that came off the weather wire. And also noticing, looking at flight radar 24 right now, big storms up around Dallas, severe thunderstorm warnings up there. And I've seen a couple of planes coming in on flight radar diverting to Austin from Dallas. So that's going on in North Texas as we speak. Next couple of days, 1 to 2 inches of rain, if you believe the National Weather Service Weather Prediction Center in College Park. They say in the next couple of days, and if they'll make it rain 1 to 2 inches down here, thank you. We need it. We still, we've had some rain. As Kim knows, in this part of the country, we've had a little rain down here, but we're still kind of flirting with the drought conditions. We need more of a soaking rain, and we have an opportunity for that, James, over the next day or so.
Awesome. So, Kim, this is May. Aren't tornadoes supposed to be flying through Oklahoma this time of the year?
Not now, and not anytime in the short run, that's for sure. We're enjoying this little thin cold wedge as well, and we're just having sort of a blasé bit of spring, which is okay. We've been the beneficiary of some more of the soaking rains, so we're sitting pretty well here in central Oklahoma for precipitation and drought conditions. So pretty grateful for that. And like we discussed, we've had just such a string of different kinds of these like sort of compounding micro disasters, weather disasters here, that we're okay. You know, it's okay if we don't incur the wrath of May this year. But if you believe the CFS, it's been sort of signaling, there have been some of these more persistent climate scale signals that perhaps the end of May, early June could be a little bit more interesting. So we'll just, we'll see what comes our way over the coming weeks and how that continues to shape up. But for now, I'll take a quiet May.
Well, Kim, I've got to be honest with you. As I sit here and look at everybody, first disaster of the year here, second disaster of the year, James. Kim was the third with the 3-inch hail in the last couple of weeks. So the rest of you, and Daryl, you had damage, didn't you? You had
from the derecho?
The ratio. You had the derecho late last year.
We're number one, right? For most damaging thunderstorm.
So the rest of y'all, you're going to get yours. So.
Well, I got mine last Tuesday night, Troy. We got 4.95 inches of rain in 2 hours.
Gosh.
Yep.
But did it flood your basement, Bill?
No.
Well, then
no.
You're still on the board with us.
No, because I built the flood defenses that have not been seen since the Netherlands.
Wow.
And
wow.
So I'm telling you, I'm not going to dare anything, but
yeah.
But I did not do it. But I did go out because I was bragging to my wife. Elle, I was like, honey, the flood defenses are working great. And she goes, you better go out there and look on your patio because it's halfway up the grill pole. Oh my gosh. The culvert that we built to take this water away looked like a bathtub because it was underwater. It couldn't even move the water out fast enough. So I got out there and pushed it over the edge of the ridge there and lived to tell about it. But
did she get this on video?
I was frantic. I mean, my blood pressure went through the roof because I'm just not going through this anymore. But I walked down the street to see the creek. And James, you know, you heard there was a street in Vestavia that had water in houses. Well, that's the street.
Oh, wow.
And so it was really terrible. Even those two big events, you know, in 19 and 20, I don't think pushed this much water out. It was really crazy. I watched somebody about to go drive through this 50 feet of water. I'm like, no, stop. I'm going to throw my body in front of your expedition here because you can't drive across that water. And fortunately,
turn around, don't drown. And Nate, I'm seeing some big storms south of you tonight.
Yeah, we had was under 2 separate severe thunderstorm warnings, and I think I got maybe 1/10 of an inch of rain out of the second one. Nothing out of the first one because the tail end of it fizzled out before it got here. Then there's some stuff south of here, and then we turn chilly for the rest of the week with highs in the 60s. We should be up near 80 this time of year. So I am not complaining. I love the cool weather. I love the wet weather. I would, give me this every day of the week. Drought sucks. There's nothing positive about drought whatsoever. So give me the wet. Let's go.
Yeah, I'm about to say, I think that has been used before. So Aubrey, how cool are you going to be? If Nate's getting highs in the 60s, what do you got?
Yeah, we're going to be in the 60s also. So our high was at midnight today. So our afternoon high was only like 62 degrees. So we're going to be in the low to mid 60s this week. Probably we'll have just enough of a breeze to prevent frost threshold, but it's going to be close for a few spots. So it's kind of one of those where it's cool. It's not threatening cold to a lot of our agriculture, but it's just above that threshold. So then we'll start to rebound a bit as we get into the weekend, but nice and refreshing, for doing stuff outside this week. 60s, I mean, that's always good before it turns 80 degrees and it gets too hot, because it always seems like you have a 2-week window and then it could be raining in that 2 weeks, or you're not home and you don't have a chance to do anything. And all of a sudden it's 85 degrees and it's too hot to do anything outside. So some great weather to just kind of enjoy.
Awesome. So, Daryl, what's happening in the corn belt of the fruited plain?
Well, we've been dry. We've had a really strange April, and we have a really strange year altogether. We have record low amounts of severe weather so far, and we've had a really record dry April, and we've got 90% of the corn in the ground already for the first week of May, which is pretty much crazy. And then the corn is just sitting there because it's been cold and wet, or cold and dry so far. And so, if it doesn't start warming up soon, start worrying about the seeds in the ground rotting, but it's not to that point yet.
All right. Well, Bill, I'll let you do picks of the week. I have to go, but my pick, did you guys see the deal in Florida today? So some guys driving along Interstate 10 near Defuniak Springs in Walton County, lightning strikes Interstate 10 in front of him. It literally blows a hole in the interstate. Part of the pavement is lofted, and it comes back and it goes through the guy's truck.
Was he injured, James?
Yeah, there were two people, occupants in the vehicle, and both were injured. Just horrifying. But anyway, that's my pick of the week. You'll see the images. It was from the Walton Fire and Rescue, but pretty crazy stuff. But Bill,
hey James, you were signing books over there a minute ago. My pick of the week is going to be your new kids book, Benny and Chipper. Tell us about that real quick before you get away.
It's just so many kids are afraid of weather, or they're really interested. So I commissioned a couple of creatives in my family to do a children's book series, starting with preparedness and don't be afraid, it's okay. Ginger Z, our friend, she wrote the foreword. I do a bit at the back, but yeah, thanks. It's Benny and Chipper, Prepared, Not Scared. So thanks for the plug.
Well, thank you for everything you do, James, and we'll have to continue to talk about that in coming weeks. Aubrey, you have time to do any email, or do we have any email?
We actually don't have any email, but if I can do my pick of the week real quick before I get into the show. So we had some pretty hefty storms here last Tuesday, and the National Weather Service in Wakefield, Virginia, which is southeastern Virginia, ended up, I honestly didn't even hardly see them over there because I was dealing with everything in my own market. However, they picked up, Louisa County, which is in their CWA, picked up a wind gust of 89 miles an hour. And if you have no idea where Louisa County, Virginia is, that's okay. But if you remember the earthquake in Virginia in 2012, that was centered in Louisa County. So it all ties together. 89 mile an hour wind gust, which AKQ says is the highest from their office since their office was established. So they have a great write-up about the mid-level lapse rates were really key here, and high temperatures were just explosive.
Outstanding. Well, thank you for getting that in, Aubrey. We appreciate that. Troy Kimmel, you got a pick of the week for us?
No, I don't. I get the foghorn this week. I mean, if I did have one, it'd be one of Daryl's things that he dug up for me. But, he did it earlier today. I just had a chance to. I want to look at that one a little more. But amazing work he does.
Well, Daryl will loan you one, Troy. Daryl, what would you loan Troy tonight?
Feature of the day.
Oh yeah, I like that one.
Yeah, just a little blurb I put on the front page each day, trying to hook in traffic. But I'd say it's the SPC Outlooks page now, where it's my pinned Twitter message, but it's basically a page where you can generate SPC Outlooks back to 1987 now, and so it'll generate a map for a statewide, a CWA wide, or CONUS wide for any of the day one or day two outlooks.
Outstanding.
Yep.
Well, Nate Johnson, I know you don't need a pick of the week. Why don't you share yours? But if Daryl needs to give you one, he's certainly standing by.
Oh no, I got you hooked up today. Today is the 25th anniversary of the release of Twister.
Woo.
You all know it. We
were all in line at the theater.
All in line
right?
at the theater the first day. I watched it first day. A lot
work early. Yeah, that's
crazy. That's an interesting movie for a lot of different reasons. Number one, it's the cult classic of our industry. Number two, it was the first movie released on DVD as opposed to exclusively VHS. That's a little tidbit for you. Number three, John Knox at the University of Georgia has written a paper talking about the Twister effect and how a lot of people either got into weather or were encouraged in their pursuit of studying weather. And that resulted in a glut of meteorology students for which at the time we might not have had, jobs, that sort of thing. But the other thing is that one of my colleagues, Rick Mitchell, was in the movie. He is TV meteorologist number 3 in the movie, and did a quick interview with one of the local Dallas stations today. So my pick of the week is that 3-minute on-air interview talking about how it came to be and his little part and how they shot it and all this kind of stuff. Meteorologist number 1, by the way, Gary England.
Yeah. But am I the only meteorologist that was forced to watch that with a bottle of vodka? I mean, I had to have a bottle of
suspension
vodka
of disbelief, Troy. It just a suspension of disbelief, and let it wash over you, my friend.
Did the usher come and throw you out of the theater, Troy, when he found you with your bottle of vodka?
They had to buy me a bottle of vodka to watch it. So
that's probably
Troy, I don't know what you're talking about. That is exactly what chasing is like. There is never downtime. It's night, and then you just go to the next place, and it's day, and it just keeps going in this never-ending cycle of ceaseless activity. And you stop to have steak dinners in the middle of it, and I mean it's all very, very.
Well, I have students, Kim, that ask, is it okay to go tie yourself into a well house as a tornado moves by? And I'm saying probably not a good idea. Okay.
Yeah, there's this little
better
thing
than
called
taking
flying
shelter
debris.
in the barn of all of the sharp pointy things. So that could be a show title too: the barn of sharp pointy.
The barn of sharp pointy things. If you want to see what NSSL does not look like, watch Twister. That is 100% at the time. In the 90s, it didn't represent what it looked like, and it's still 0%.
And you know what? I did not have a copy of it before Christmas last year. I now have it on Blu-ray, so I don't have to. I'm not at the mercy of AMC or whatever cable channel is showing it on even Saturday. Can watch it anytime I want in glorious HD. It's amazing.
That's awesome. Well, that's a good segue to Dr. Kim Clocko-McClain. How about a pick of the week for us, Kim?
Sure. Well, not nearly as fun as Twister, though. It's been really fun to enjoy that anniversary. Interestingly enough, just a quick side note. How we have, with Facebook, it has this nice feature. If you're on Facebook, it has this neat feature for on this day. And 5 years ago, so on the 10th, that would have been the 10th anniversary
20.
of Twister, right? 15th?
20.
God, 20.
20th, yeah.
20.
Sorry, yeah, 20. Oh my gosh, what year even is it?
25 today.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So 20th anniversary. I was in DC, and I really was missing being in Oklahoma. That movie really makes me miss being where I am now. And I was saying, I'd love to be in the Weather Center for this anniversary. It's so fun. Well, now here it is, the 25th anniversary, and I'm still not in the Weather Center. This stupid pandemic. Yeah. Anyway, so I really appreciated that pick and that memory. But my pick of the day is a little bit more on the policy for science vein. It's a piece about how Congress is envisioning the future of NSF, but it also could have implications for us in NOAA, and it's just sort of science policy writ large. There's been a really big conversation about, the federal government spends a lot of R&D dollars to develop science. Shouldn't it also be in the business of getting technology forwarded? And couldn't we create a directorate in NSF to do this? Well, if you are inside NOAA or have followed NOAA for any length of time, you know that there's been this big conversation about trying to do technology transfer and to develop that on our own. And there have also been questions that have been raised about, since people like me have gotten involved on the social science side, saying, well, is technology a be all end all? Is that really going to solve all of our problems? Is that where we should be putting all of our focus? Or should we perhaps have goals that are more about societal well-being and backtrack ourselves from there and ask ourselves, well, what role can technology play in that, among other things? And that's exactly what's being debated right now for NSF. There are some people there's one version of the bill in the Senate that's been very tech focused, and the other version in the House has been more societal well-being focused. And so that'll be a really interesting thing to follow. It'll shape NSF, but it'll undoubtedly also shape us. So very interested to follow that. And for people who are science policy wonks, you can check that out.
So is it receiving bipartisan support, or is it kind of split? What's the deal?
Yeah, I actually am not sure too deep on the weeds of that. My sense has been that there's been bipartisan support for doing some cultivation. The exact form and function of it, I don't think that there's necessarily a direct just partisanship split on it, since these two visions are actually being forwarded by Democrats as I understand it, in both the Senate and the House. It's just very genuine different visions for how to proceed. And I think that's actually a really kind of nice thing when it can be that, rather than an old state partisan divide.
Exactly. Well, thank you, Kim, for that. Bruce Jones, you always wow us with a pick. What you got for us this week?
Well, I was going to say, I got to go on the movie junket for Twister. And that's where the TV station sends you up to interview the stars before the movies, debuts. And interviewing Bill Paxton, I remember he was very excited about it. He was like a little boy. He knew it was going to be a hit just because it was about tornadoes. Interviewing Helen Hunt, she was a very established actress. And my impression of Helen Hunt was she was a little embarrassed. She thought the thing was going to be a flop. But she just didn't think that a movie about chasing twisters could make any kind of money at all. Probably ended up being the most profitable movie of Helen Hunt's career. But the most interesting quote came from Jamie Gertz. She was the actress who played the psychologist who said, on the phone, I've got to go, we've got cows. I said, hey, Jamie, I know these are computer generated tornadoes, but I noticed in the movie, you guys are all looking at the same spot, so you're all faced in the same direction, looking at the same spot. She said, well, that's what acting is all about. We have to pretend. I said, I know that, but you're all focused on the same spot. I said, how did you know where to look out in that field? And she laughed and she said, you know what? We had a guy, a production assistant, who had basically a kind of a stick and a big red X on the top of the stick. And his job was to run across the field, and he represented the tornado. And that's what we would look at. And she said he was kind of a nutcase, and just for fun, he would spin around and act real goofy as he ran. So when you see that computer generated tornado going across the field, there's actually a guy there with like a mop pole and a big red X on it. They're acting like a complete whirlybird.
Well, that's made this entire show worthwhile. I thought it couldn't be any more fun, but Bruce, you just topped everything. Now, Daryl, I've been saving you for last here. Wow us with one more or two more, how many ever you're willing to give us.
I was supposed to do 10, but I'll limit it to, let's see. I think that I have a very large archive of METAR data. So if you ever want to go download METAR data from any airport site that has been disseminating METAR data, it should be there on my website under the ASOS network. And then something arcane, I've got an archive of PIREPs. People that want to download PIREPs can get them from my website of all places. So obviously it's intuitive. You want any PIREPs that were issued, just go to me, right? Anyway,
so
thank you for the opportunity.
What did agron mean, or what does it mean, Daryl?
It means agronomy. So we care about the interface of environment, soil, air, water.
Outstanding. Well, I
try
think
to grow plants.
Nate said in the chat, and I would agree 100%. This has been a really fun show. We've enjoyed this immensely, Daryl. We thank you for all the cool stuff you do. We thank you for staying up late with us tonight.
No problem.
Any other further WeatherBrains business, Mr. Kimmel? He's looking. That's the German signal, I think. WeatherBrains is the weekly netcast all about weather. We do it on Monday nights, 8 p.m. Central Time. I think that's going to work until Memorial Day. That show's going to get moved to Tuesday night, but we've got just a slew of tremendous guests coming up all the way through June now into July. So looking forward to it. And the really cool thing, Nate, is when I call people now, I don't have to tell them who we are. After 15 years, they generally know who we are. I remember you used to have explained to it. It's a what? It's a podcast. What is that? It's called WeatherBrains. I'm not a weather brain. And I just like, oh, please just say yes. But we'll have lots of great guests in coming weeks. I can't remember who next week for 800 is. And I could look, but I'd have to open up another computer over here.
Stand by. I've got it right here.
There we go, Nate. You're coming through for me.
2 seconds to switch to.
We are going to do a Joplin remembrance. It's not going to be right on the date of the anniversary, but it's shaping up to be a really good show because we've had a lot of unfortunate anniversaries this year. All right, Nate, tell us.
Joplin will be June 1st. James Adelot from Tulsa on June 7th. We got the guy who's recreating the old Weather Star from the Weather Channel.
That's going to be a fun one.
Mid-June. That's going to be like a geeky, like hardware techie ham radio. That's going to be good stuff. A meteorologist from Spire coming on in mid-July. Some good stuff. And TWIP is what we have in the calendar for 800.
The Tornado Warning Improvement Project. Yeah,
that's it right there. That
sounds
like a very appropriate thing for next week.
It does. Well, until we get together at the same time, same place next Monday night, I'm a guest booking officer, Bill Murray, reminding you to keep an eye to the sky because you'll always have something fun to look at. Well, thank y'all so much. It was a really fun show.
It was. Thanks, Daryl.
That was fun. Yeah, thanks for being here, Daryl.
Come back anytime, Daryl.
All right. Thank you.
Bye, Bruce. Bye, everybody.
Peace.
And once again, ladies and gentlemen, I'm the last one here. But hey, guys, thank you guys for watching. Great to have Daryl on the show. That was a ton of fun when I go back and listen to the whole thing in coming days in the car. But we'll see you guys next Monday night at 8 o'clock Central, 9 o'clock Eastern for Weather Brains. Join me on the Instagram, Song of the Night, SpanWX.